Figured it out. Morning, everyone. Random little blip there. I don't know if anyone noticed. Camera wasn't working for a second. Hope everyone's doing good this morning. Just still getting spooled up here. Jumping on a couple minutes early because I actually want to do a little studying almost. Had some good thoughts yesterday about trading and what I want to do with what I'm trying to do recently. About the NASDAQ and trading. Talk about that in a second though. Hope everyone's reset from yesterday. Surprisingly enough, I actually am very reset, which feels really good. Lost my water, hold on. Okay. Morning, everyone. Just gonna go ahead and see kind of what we did last night, but also kind of look at pull up a couple notes here. I'm just gonna look at the charts real quick and try and pull up a couple spots that I can remember. I need to do a much more formal study on this, but just a couple spots where I kind of remember from the last week really of V bottoms. That worked out. Really interesting how what yesterday? Yeah, yesterday pretty much did what I thought in terms of pulled back and then actually shot up. That was definitely interesting to see. This was a V bottom spot I liked last week. I think the signal is good in terms of looking for that, but the big picture wasn't aligned. Like a big thing I want to do is with these is focusing on the big picture more, because that's where the reads generally are, and leaning into that more. Versus recently, I feel like I'm getting kind of sucked into the minor moves. You know, kind of what's it doing on a 1 minute versus a 5 minute, and then also kind of how is it in correlation to the ES and NASDAQ. I don't really know if I have too much time to find these I'll have to go back in my actual journal to kind of see things a little better. Is this one? No, that day was horrible. This is a bottom that did happen, actually. I took this one on the ES, though. But there was this kind of top. In terms of we had a nice spike up. Clean, super clean rejection here. Interesting to see how I would think about managing this trade in real time. I don't think I'd scale in a second time on this guy. You don't understand the need for two stocks to correlate because the S&P 500 is many different. The NASDAQ and the S&P 500 are very different, but they're also... The S&P 500, I don't know the exact percentage, maybe someone knows, but the amount of weight in the S&P 500 with some of the big tech stocks is double-digit percentages. So it's like it does correlate a lot because they're, they both just have so much of the same stuff in them. But I do kind of agree with you in the sense of I'm trying to think about, do I, is that correlation really as necessary right now? I think it's helped me in the past, but maybe in this current market conditions, it's not really, doesn't really matter as much. And it's more of like, okay, what is the NASDAQ doing? And kind of going from there and seeing how that's playing out. And I think big picture, kind of seeing them both align, maybe on like a 5-minute or 15-minute can help. But I think what I was thinking about recently is, well, if something is not quite aligned on the smaller time frame, I don't think that matters as much. Leaning into that stuff. So I want to try and focus more on leaning into the big picture, because that's usually where my reads are actually from. And then the not getting essentially bogged down in the micro movements of the 1-minute chart. The 1-minute chart isn't really to analyze for a trade. It's really just to get a super accurate entry. And if I'm getting too stuck up on some of the other stuff happening on a 1-minute chart, I think that's actually hurting my trading. 85% of the NASDAQ is in the S&P 500. Yeah, so that's, someone else says XLK, which is I believe the NASDAQ ETF, some kind of tech ETF. I forget exactly what, but 33% correlated. So, they're just heavily correlated. And so sometimes I think, if one's moving and the other one isn't, there's kind of a red flag there. Because it's going to pull one, it just means there's not clean, methodical, readable movement. But a lot of what's been happening recently is the NASDAQ, like this week, the S&P 500 has been very choppy right at the open, and the NASDAQ has been having big whips. You find it better sticking to the 5-minute? Yeah, I've over time, I've always gone out to a wider and wider chart. And I think I'm getting close to that point where I still think entering in on a 1-minute can be good. Because a lot of these moves, I think waiting for a 5-minute can be a little slow, especially in the NASDAQ with these morning spikes. But I think looking for the confirmation, you know, mainly is like, okay, we're at this 5-minute level. I'm going to look for a long here and then going into 1 minute and not really thinking about the micro movements and what that means as much, you know. Obviously, I do want to still be waiting for that kind of really nice spike flush lower that I like, because I think that is like the bottoming signal a lot of the time, kind of like we had in the NASDAQ yesterday. Going into a 1 minute chart here, like this final flush lower we had here, to me that was the signal that that could be the bottom. And so if that could be the bottom, I can put my stop there and jump in and, you know, look at the 5 minute and be like, okay, well, if this is the bottom on a 5 minute, you know, what are we going to do, you know, from here? You know, what's the potential? And kind of going from there. And so that's helps, I think, will drown out the noise. And I think what I actually want to do is I want to lean into focusing just on the NASDAQ right now. I think I'm going to try and not look at the S&P 500 on a 1 minute at all. I'm just going to look at the correlation and how it's moving on a 5 minute, because again, big picture I think is important, but not get bogged down in the micro movements on the 1 minute chart for, you know, to enter in a trade or not. It has, I think there is times where it does help, but I think right now it's just not, it's not helping me, and I need to take that off. You know, simplify. I always find removing things is the way to go in trading. So I'm gonna actually mark this little level, and I'm gonna zoom out, you know, kind of start. Those are kind of my thoughts. I'll reiterate them because, you know, most people aren't even on yet, but definitely wanting to see kind of big picture where we're at. Interesting enough, this trend line is still, is that overnight movement? No, that's just yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see if we come down and test this, if we sell off. It looks like on the S&P 500 here, we pretty much just tapped all-time highs. And we're kind of looking to test this. This is definitely like very, very middle of the range. Almost exactly at 50% pullback of this swing. So that's interesting to see. But it definitely kind of showing some weakness. Not really a crazy change in levels. And so NASDAQ here. Don't change my strategy, just recognize the market isn't giving me that final confirmation. Yeah, I'm not, in reality, I'm really not changing it that much. Like really, it's, to me, it feels like a big change, but I think in the reality of things, it's a very small change. And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You know, I mean, maybe I'll make the change and realize over time, okay, that actually wasn't worth doing. But in trading, a lot of the times you don't necessarily know until you do it. You know, the idea is you're always trying to get better. And I think this is something that's going to make me better at trading. And so that's why I'm trying to make those slow adjustments. So if you are on YouTube and you only see the vertical stream, you have to go, I'm seeing your message on Twitch, someone. And so you got to go to my YouTube profile and then you'll pull up the full stream. So if you just go to YouTube, Riley Coleman, or just click on my homepage, you'll see the main stream here. There is a secondary stream. I just have to have that because the full stream doesn't get served to certain spaces on YouTube, and I don't want to, you know, miss capturing those people, right? And them seeing the stream. You can watch on Twitch if you want, but obviously the chat's not really there. Maybe eventually that'll grow. NASDAQ's definitely like, there's not really You know, the ES is in much more sideways action this morning. The NASDAQ is much more bullish. Made a new all-time high just this pre-market. We're definitely kind of in this upper wedge. I'm going to mark this as a all-time high level, but I don't really think that we would hit that and really do anything. I think this is actually a pretty good level right here for a support, just because this it's pretty much yesterday's previous resistance zone. And then this is an overnight pullback that pretty much tested that. So I definitely like this zone on the NASDAQ. And then obviously if we break that, I'll kind of look at other things, but you know, like something like this. But until then, you know, I've got this zone or this level that needs to get broken too. But there's, you know, we'll see going forwards. And in terms of like direction today, I mean, again, I'm always assuming we can go any direction. I'm just gonna look at oil here on a 5-minute. Actually, I'm gonna zoom out to a 15-minute here. Kind of just breaking higher, doing this big bottom. You know, big picture, oil has just been in this, looking at a daily chart. We've just been in this, we're just in this wedge of some kind. You know, there's not really a low of it, but we're just in this chop back and forth. And so there's not really, you know, I'm usually just using that for if there's a spike and some kind of crazy news. But until then, you know, I'm not really looking at that. Mainly focusing on the NASDAQ. I think we'll see how the market opens and tests this. This isn't necessarily a spot to go long on the S&P 500. Most likely we would need to see a little movement. As well as looking at news here. I know there's news this morning. We've got 15 minutes after the open, super minor news. That's not really going to do anything. The big one is 10 minutes after the open is ISM service PMI. It looks like there's some Treasury Secretary maybe speaking. I don't know. That's not going to cause movement right away, but it could cause movement over while they speak. But the real movement is this red one, the ISM. So definitely want to be aware of that at 10 o'clock. So NASDAQ here. Just gonna get my drawings. Let me know if you guys have any questions. You do need to hit that sub button to do it. Bit of a delay there. And for the NASDAQ, I'm gonna be trading the MNQ because recently it's like every time I do, that's what I can trade in terms of like trying to scale in. The normal contract size is still too big for me on the NASDAQ for half size. Maybe once I size up I can, but having that ability to break that up, I think is a lot better for me. My entry does really only depend on technical patterns. Just gonna look at my notes here from some of the stuff I talked about or mentioned earlier. like last night, yesterday I felt kind of frustrated because I felt like I was focusing too much on results and kind of getting away from that process focus. And last night and throughout yesterday, I felt like I was able to reset and really come back to that process mindset and that focus, and that felt really good closing the day out like that. And going into today, obviously, I want to continue to think that way. And I think it just felt good in terms of, you'll have emotional ups and downs. And the big thing is, maybe the last couple of days, like last 2 days, I was kind of feeling that. And I didn't allow it to derail my trading in the sense of I didn't take unnecessary losses. And so that's, I think, is a really big important about trading is anyone is going to have times where things are frustrating and sometimes your emotions try to get the better of you, and just being able to not let them force you to take trades or do something kind of silly. Like yesterday's stream, like I was definitely kind of frustrated about not taking that long, but also conflicted. And I did the disciplined thing of getting off the charts when, the NASDAQ popped up here. Was it there? Yeah, maybe it popped up here. Wait, oh, this is a 5-minute chart. I was wondering why that looks so small. But the NASDAQ popped up here, and then, even me, I was like, oh, what if this just shorts and sells off? But to me, the read was it's going to have some kind of pullback and continue. And even as I was closing, people in chat were like, oh, short this, or it's going to go as soon as you close out. And to me, that also adds into the FOMO. But sticking to the read of, no, this was the move. I don't see even if this does play out, I don't see the edge here as much in terms of the big picture read. And so, happy about that, and trying not to let things derail me is a big and important factor of trading, because, once you kind of get back in the right mindset and focus and seeing things, you're going to make money. You're mentioning my my stream titles. I would say a little bit of both. I mean, like, to be blunt, yesterday this first 60 minutes was crazy. But yeah, a little bit of it is gaming the title system. That's just the game of YouTube. You'd like to see me trade longer? I mean, I've been this week has actually been pretty quick, but some of the weeks I have been going for like 2 hours. But that's generally if I'm in a trade. I do live stream every single day that I trade. I might not be trading. I think I won't be trading Friday, actually. I'm planning to go climb a mountain with my wife, so won't be trading that day because we got to get up really early to go do that, since there's a lot of thunderstorms right now. I'm not trying to get shocked. First 15 minutes you should never trade because there's a lot of trapping. Well, a lot of the times what I look for in that first 15 minutes is that trap. Like yesterday, I think was a great example. Was it opened, and after that pretty much that 15 minutes is when that reversal happened. And so to me, that's kind of, that's why I have vertical lines at 9:45 and 10, because to me, those are the reversal times where those traps, a lot of the times reverse. How many trades have I taken this week? I have taken 0. Yesterday, I think hindsight, there was a little one I should have taken, but it was a tricky one. Super fast V bottom in the morning, that I was just showing. So that was, those, I'm trying to get better at capturing those, but it's hard because they happen so fast. And when something happens fast like that, to me, my muscle memory is almost trained now to say, if I have to do something fast, that's impulsive, and that means I'm FOMOing. And so to me, I've trained myself to stop myself from doing something in that point and waiting for more confirmation, which is this. This is what I'm talking about. Like, this happened very quickly. But there's times where I actually think now it's okay to jump in a spot like this. Obviously, I'm scaling in. I'd be jumping in smaller size, because if this happens, great, I capture a little bit of money and it's super easy. And if it pulls back and I lose, I don't lose that much. And if it pulls back and sets up a cleaner signal, I can get in again and size up and capture even more. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do there. Will I be recording the hike? I actually am planning to, for my second channel that is not out yet. I don't know if it'll make it, because I'm still a noob at recording outside things. I live in Colorado. Do I exercise or meditate? I pretty much exercise every day. The last month I've been kind of slacking because I've just been working so much. That's just a sacrifice I've decided to make. But ideally, my hope is in, and I'm feeling a little burnt out because I'm working so much. But ideally, my hope is, and that's, I think, is starting to affect my trading a little bit, which isn't good. And so I'm hoping that maybe next week or soon, in a couple weeks, that'll start to slow down a little bit, and I can really kind of just get in a groove of focusing on trading and not having to overwork myself, and I can get back into working out more often. Hey Marcus, about your NinjaTrader issue, I'm not 100% sure what you mean. I do know NinjaTrader has literally a support phone line you can call, so maybe that'll help. Have I been profitable since I started streaming? I actually have, but it's definitely not as much as I'd like. Last week was down. Some of the weeks have been flat. I mean, just frankly, this market has been extremely hard too. So that and streaming, and it has just, I'm trying to adjust, right? I'm the kind of person that wants to do it all, and sometimes that is doing too much at once. And it's almost like a boom and bust cycle, in terms of, like, I'm doing good, I get excited about like something like streaming and a bunch of other stuff going on, and so I add too much on, in a way, essentially have a little bit of a pullback because I'm overloading myself, and then eventually I figure it out and start to do good again. So that's something and that's just like throughout my whole life, in terms of everything I do. And so that's kind of you know, just personal thing that I have to deal with. Do I share when I enter a trade and exit? Yes, I pretty much talk through everything. And it's super easy to see on a chart because that's just how my NinjaTrader is set up. So we've got, I've been talking off the rails here for a minute. I'll go through everything here in a second. What I'm looking for today. So the NASDAQ, I have kind of a thought is I want to actually focus more on just trading the NASDAQ right now. I've been kind of going back and forth for a couple weeks on how I want to approach trading the NASDAQ and the ES, and I've been kind of conflicted on using both of them and which one to trade. I think simplicity wise, I want to try and just focus on the NASDAQ. And I'm still going to watch the S&P 500, but just on a 15-minute and a 5-minute. I'm not going to look at the 1 minute because I think that's just micro movement that just distracts me. You know, at the end of the day, for me, my signals are the big picture levels. You know, like on the S&P 500, we're at this support level. There's these highs. We're more in this range here. I think the S&P 500 could go either direction. It's actually not really moving right now compared to the NASDAQ is having a little bit of bounce off this level. NASDAQ is definitely more bullish here. But, you know, generally speaking, they usually follow the same direction to some extent. But you can see clearly there's a little bit of uncorrelated movement in terms of bullishness versus bearishness, but I don't think that really changes things enough to warrant, you know, getting too bogged down in those reads. So the NASDAQ on a 5-minute, you know, there's not much to add there. We've got this kind of unhealthy move. It looks like we're reversing right now. And that would be the all-time highs. Definitely I could see that happening, of hitting those all-time highs. The ES is definitely just more bearish here. I mean, it's setting up, I would say almost a bear flag. So I think it'll be important to see how we open here. And I'll look for some kind of reversal at that point. You know, to quickly go through my checklist is basically what I look for is like if the NASDAQ comes up really fast in an unhealthy way, and an unhealthy way is just like this. Like this is an unhealthy move on a 1-minute chart. Big candlesticks one direction with not out much pullback. And so if the NASDAQ kind of does that up to here, I'll kind of look to see if we make some kind of double top, you know, reversal pattern, and then I'll look to bet lower. I will say I would rather take a long though. I would rather the NASDAQ pull down here, retest this pre-market support, and then look for some kind of long to the upside, just because big picture things are bullish. Definitely big picture as well, things are very back and forth still. Like you can, there's shorts and longs in this market, but the longs usually are a little better. And every time we kind of, especially on the NASDAQ, every time we kind of make a new high, all-time high, things, that's not where it reverses, you know? It reverses after making a new all-time high and having that trend slow down a little bit. We don't really make an all-time high and reverse off of it, at least on the NASDAQ. On the S&P 500, pretty much exactly hit that all-time high. What is that, Monday, and reverse from there. So we'll see how things open, because again, the first 10 or 15 minutes can get a little crazy. And I like to kind of see that initial bait. And then we also have, for people who missed it, we do have news 15 minutes and 30 minutes after the market open. The 15-minute one isn't that big, where the 10-minute one actually is pretty big. I don't trade gold, so I don't really look at it. But there are people that do use my strategy on gold. So that's kind of a quick run through my strategy. A lot of those beginner questions on how futures work, how, more detail on how it works, you can see on my YouTube channel. I talk through a lot of that in actual polished YouTube videos that really clearly explain everything. So I definitely highly recommend going and looking at those. After this, if you're, kind of more new to what I do and kind of like what you see. But at the end of the day, I basically try and keep things very simple. That's why I only trade a couple markets. I don't use any indicators. The only one I really use is this fair value gap indicator. Because again, if you see, anytime you have these fair value gaps, they pretty much just get reversed. Not always right away, but that's why, like down here, if the market was open, I don't trade pre-market, but if the market was down here, I would look for a reversal because this is going to get reversed most likely. You can just look back in the chart. Anytime you have a big move like this, it gets reversed. Same thing here. Big move down, it got reversed. So that's kind of what I just look for every morning. Just lost everything on that candle. I mean, that's my biggest thing of why I don't trade into the open or pre-market. I mean, it worked pretty well if you were long. I mean, I think pre-market, the move down here was to be long. Like it was definitely setting up a bottom pattern. I don't trade that, but that's to me what I kind of saw the possibility here. But this is hindsight. Like this could have gone down here too. I mean, the market, especially the NASDAQ, has opened and moved 50 to 100 points in the first couple candlesticks every day. And so it's a massive risk to take if you're trying to trade into that. And so that's why I usually just stay out of it, because to me, it seems more like a gamble. It's not something predictable and methodical. So the NASDAQ literally just popped into all-time highs there. Again, on the NASDAQ, I don't think all-time highs really mean that much. And the ES here is recovering that move down as well. As a beginner, how would you create your own checklist? I think slowly over time, obviously it depends on what your strategy is. Simpler, I think, is better. And as well, don't make it so specific. Like mine, you can see it's very general, in terms of there's a reversal zone. Like the biggest thing there, it has to be at a reversal zone, because those are my bigger picture areas where the market is likely to reverse, right? And then an unhealthy move. Like this is an unhealthy move right now for sure. Like this is a crazy opening spike. And so to me, I want to see that, because that means there's movement in the market and there's a potential for a snapback to happen. And to me, that means that there's good risk reward, there's good potential for a trade, and you don't want to be jumping in when there isn't good potential to make money, because you can spot the reversal or you can spot the direction, but if you can't actually profit from it, it doesn't matter. And it's definitely the checklist is a little generalized. There's multiple reversal patterns that I do look for. And the reversal zones, they're drawn off of a 5 or 15-minute chart. So they're kind of bigger picture levels. Just because, again, I want to see the bigger picture trend. And right now, like this looks like a great bait to all-time highs if this thing wants to sell off. The S&P 500, kind of similar, but it's just not really moving. Last couple days have honestly been like that. NASDAQ could just be coming down to this upwards trend line. I'll actually put that on all my charts. You know, there's not really a good support zone because we're just trending so well. And so sometimes using a trend line can help a little more, but I'm not going to trade until this starts to slow down, because I don't know if this is going to just develop into just a crazy sell-off. Like with this movement, we could easily pop down to here. And to me, that's the better support zone. Here, buying here is more middle of the range. I can, you know, sure, there's kind of like, there's potential support here. I'll definitely draw that in case it does look like we're going to kind of bounce there. But I do need to see like it start to slow down. I realize this text is wrong in terms of looking for a short down here. I don't know if anyone mentioned that. So, I mean, ideally we pop all the way down here, but that would also be a very big move. To me, that's almost like such a big move that I'd be a little concerned that there was something that it's more than just a flush that's easy to reverse, that there's something actually behind this move and that it's going to continue. Interesting enough, though, these moves on the NASDAQ here, I will say it seems like we're a little smaller size than even yesterday. Because if I look at the contract size, was I think larger yesterday to capture what kind of looked like this move. So kind of see, that's just kind of interesting to see. ES is definitely in this spot where I could see it. It's kind of at this support. That's a crazy pullback from the NASDAQ. To me, that could be a bottoming pattern. I was trying to think here because like this is usually a potential signal that I've been talking about recently, but it's almost just, I think I need to see a little couple more candlesticks. And maybe that's just me being a little, it just seems a little early for this kind of move. You know, we're not even at 9:45. It's literally, I mean, it is 10 minutes into the market. ES looks like it's still kind of actually selling off here. So I'm just looking at, we are at a reversal zone here. Like this is kind of yesterday's, the overnight support. In terms of the big picture, I'm not sure why this trend line didn't, oh, that's because my 15-minute chart is on the NASDAQ, not the MNQ. We're pretty much coming down to this support. think I'm going to scale in one here. If it looks like it's going to bottom. ES is still making lows. You know, big picture, we're bouncing off this support zone, and that trend line. Part of me does not like this, but I'm really trying to get better with not having the entry needing to be perfect. You know, that's more of what I want to focus on right now versus waiting for that perfect confirmation. But I think if it pops here and pulls back and breaks this, that's a decent little pullback signal there. And I'll just half size. And then the ES here is actually continuing to actually push lower. So if it makes another stab lower, I'll pull my contract off and kind of see how things play out from there. You know, and part of me feels like this is a little too aggressive. But I just want to try and get better at taking stabs at these and knowing that they don't have to work every time. That right now the reversals are working very often though. To me, it looks like it's going to continue lower at the moment. But the ES could make one more stab here and then actually fail and continue up. I'm trying not to look at the S&P 500 on a 1 minute chart, just watching it on a 5 minute. Yeah, I'm just going to take this contract off for now, kind of see what happens. See if this weight makes one more stab lower and we maybe set up a head and shoulders. I think a doubled bottom here, though, would be a little more risky in the sense that, you know, really this is kind of basically a 50% pullback right here. So frankly, if that continues, I think going down to here and waiting for this next support zone will be the area to look for a reversal. Interesting that the ES is just leading the charge today since it's been so choppy the last couple days. So just gonna take a step back and see how things play out. The price indicator that you're seeing is a custom risk reward tool I've made. You can find a link for it in the description of the live stream. Just want to wait and see this thing kind of come down here and see how it tests this next zone and go from there. I think clearly we've blown through that trend line. You know, big picture on the NASDAQ here. We're pretty much just, I mean, we tapped all-time highs. And I think in terms of like, this is a pretty unhealthy looking move. We could definitely snap back some. But also, this is some big momentum. We could You know, yesterday it kind of looked like we had a topping pattern. Even here kind of looked a little toppy. But again, that's how it's always kind of looked is if we zoom out, you know, we're in an upper range here, pop up, we might just be another upper range. So we could pop back up here from this. Again, with idea that the big picture might come back into play. Like this is a major level here. ES is doing the same. Just looking at the S&P 500 on a 15-minute chart. The Nasdaq's actually gone past the S&P 500. The S&P 500 isn't at this support zone yet. I could definitely make this much bigger. So I think if both of these kind of come to this area, that definitely makes a good big picture spot to reverse. Obviously, though, this is massive momentum, and I don't want to get in front of this. And so it needs to slow down first. Because we had a big reversal candlestick like this, I don't think I want to jump in on the first big reversal candlestick. I need to see kind of maybe a little bit of a slowdown, one more stab lower. If we get a big bait candlestick, then I'll jump in long. Maybe it goes from there. Maybe it pulls back and I add on again, or it just, you know, continues lower. Those are kind of the options of what I'd want to see to place a trade. But if we're just going to skyrocket lower, I'll just sit here and watch it because that's just not something that's tradable. Just looking at today, we're down 1/4% in this, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So that's a pretty big move. S&P 500 is actually down 0.5%. So that's kind of big moves there. Just kind of waiting to see when this thing slows down. And if it's going to go down more, the Nasdaq, if it goes down to yesterday, we've definitely kind of blown past this support a little, but that does not mean we don't come back up and recover it. You know, down here there's a bunch of support down here, even I would say honestly, from yesterday, because that's where the market really sat for a lot of the time yesterday. Is it caused by some news? Actually, let me look at oil here. I haven't looked at oil. Oil is not moving at all. So to me, this isn't based on oil. So I would assume it's not based on news, at least for the Middle East. There could be other news, but just the way the market opened, this was out of nowhere. I think if news happened, you'd be seeing the move pre-market. This is just, you know, there's something going on in the market today. So, you know, I try not to speculate on too much on what moves the market, you know, saying, oh, it's some big bank or hedge fund deciding that this is the top and we're selling everything. You just never know, you know. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't really matter, right? All that matters is, okay, what is it doing? How do I trade it? How do I make money? And we have news, actual news at the top of the hour. We had news right here too, but clearly that didn't do anything. And it was minor news. And the interesting thing about big moves like this is I do have a bit of a rule of if it gets big enough, I don't actually try and reverse it, because there's so much momentum behind a move like this that a lot of times it won't do a fast reversal. It'll kind of go like this, more likely continue lower, or just go sideways and work off that momentum. Because there's no one that wants to buy after such a massive drop. But I think if it does set up like a head and shoulders or some kind of clean signal, I'll take a small stab at it if the risk reward potential looks really good. Knowing that I might just capture like 1 or 2x because of just how reversey this market is. I think that's the big reason why I would do that. The ES here is at this level. And you can see here, here's those big fair value gaps. They're not super long yet because there's not many candlesticks. But those are important to see. And I want to see, I'm not going to jump in right now on this. This is the initial bottom. I'm not going to jump in on that because it could just do this. I definitely want to see kind of a higher low develop and see how that plays out. Because ideally, we're essentially coming back, recovering this support and finding it and holding it. So definitely have an unhealthy move right now. Kind of waiting for the 1 minute trend to break. There's kind of this downtrend. I could see how we could get a signal before that. I think the big thing would be seeing some kind of attempt for it to continue lower to fail. Essentially a higher low here. And if it just V bottoms, that's okay. The signal is not there to trade. Even with me trying to be more aggressive, I would not take a V bottom here. There's times where I think it makes sense to take a stab at a V bottom, but this is not one of those because of how much momentum there is here. And if it just shoots up and then continues lower, like, you know, some of this crazy movement like this, it's just not tradable, and that's okay. You know, you don't need to be trying to capture every move in the market. I mean, how big is it? This is we went from 800 to 500, a 300-point move in the NASDAQ. That's huge. It causes a lot of FOMO because you want to jump in and capture some of that, but it's just, it's not really where most of your money is going to be made. A lot of it's just too difficult to capture. S&P is recovering too. Just going to look at it on a 1 minute chart out of curiosity because of how fast things are moving. Testing this trend line here, this is where I would assume that it would have a pullback if it's going to. I would assume that it would come down somewhere here. I want to see more of a pullback. I'm thinking that if I jump in long here and I have to put my stop down here, because I don't think this is a good spot to put my stop, the risk reward does not seem worth it. Like 1x to get all the way up here just doesn't seem very good. I would prefer to have my stop below this low because to me, whatever the trade market does here doesn't necessarily break the fact that this could be the low. I want to see more of a pullback, maybe some slow action here. I don't think there's a reason to jump in aggressively here with the idea that the risk reward just seems, the likelihood that we just rip up that much is just so insane. I mean, in this market, it's possible. But having a, you know, that's over a 100-point stop in the NASDAQ. That just doesn't seem like it makes sense. And I don't really, at least at the moment, maybe if we make a little bit more of a pullback here that makes sense, I can put my stop below that. But right now, if it just bottomed here and went higher, having my stop here just seems kind of it's kind of like saying that, okay, it's done bottoming. And I don't have a good signal that it's done bottoming here in terms of chopping or having a pullback. That's why I would not want to have my stop in an aggressive spot versus at the lows. To me, with these V bottoms, I like to put them at the lows because that's where the signal is. That's what I'm trying to think about more is my stop placement. And that's what's important to hold the trade, and getting it where I get in doesn't matter as much. But right now, like, we could just be bouncing off this and coming lower. And we're really just holding this downtrend right now. I mean, we pretty much perfectly bounced off this downtrend line. So there's no reason to say that this is bottoming yet. It's got potential for sure. You know, the big picture levels are definitely here, but we could be coming up and just tapping this and then continuing lower too. And if this is just going to be a massive sell-off, then but I don't want to look for, if it does a little fake height here and looks like it's going to continue lower, that's not something I take either because we've moved so much already. To me, that's chasing. We do have news at 10 in 2 minutes, so just gonna see how that plays out, especially at this point, because this news can cause a spike. And so I don't want to hold into that. I think ideally, if the news causes a spike, breaks this low, and then reverses, that is a really nice signal, and I'm definitely into buying that. But until then, we're just kind of holding this downtrend. The ES is holding this downtrend too. It looks like it's about to break it though. And if the news just spikes up, that's, you know, it's news. I'm just not gonna, then I missed the trade. You know, I'm not gonna gamble on some news release. But this is kind of making a lower high or a high low here. So it's after this candlestick closes in 30 seconds, we'll kind of see what that news does. But I think with this momentum and where we're at, I think this can definitely be a bait of a bottom. And one more flush lower would really, I think, trap people. It would knock out people's stops who are long, and it would knock out people that are betting short and trying to capture this after FOMOing in on this and seeing it hit this downtrend line. Hidden short like this would get them in, and immediately reversing would just give a good catalyst to continue higher, because they would now be hurting and they would have to close out their trade somewhere up here. So there's the little news spike. Not really much from that, but we might start moving here. And I might put my stop here if we break this, because that's a pretty nice double bottom, I think. In terms of, you know, the 1 minute trend is broken now. That's a pretty good reversal pattern. I would like to see, if this candlestick goes all the way up here, I want to see a little bit of a micro pullback in that candlestick, because that could just be some news fake out still. You know, I would prefer it fakes out the other direction and then get in, because that's, to me, is more good confirmation. This could fake out, break this high, and just rip lower. Kind of just looking at the ES here as well. big picture wise, you know, we're just finding some support at this area. I think it's definitely a good spot for a bottom big picture. I'm gonna put in a half size order here. I'm gonna put my stop down here because I think this candle is big enough. Part of me really would prefer it at the lows. I'm just gonna put it at the lows. I would rather do that. That just means I need to do 3 contracts. Just because, again, I can still see this doing some pullbacks. You know, try not to be perfect with the entry, more focusing on the stop and the signal. And then over time, you know, if stops like this just are too wide, I'll refine them. But really what I want to be focusing on right now is that entry, and widening that stop to really just go with the signal and the bigger picture. You know, the bigger picture here is looking for a bottom. And I want to just mainly collect data on that. ES also looks like it's bottoming. We'll see if this, you know, we could get one more rip lower. And I think if we get a rip lower and it does a good pump fake, that's when I would size in more. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave it as is. I don't think it's worth adding any more risk on right now. I think there's a reversal potential, and I'm in to capture that. But if there's, you know, a rip lower and it knocks me out, then I'll just call it and take the loss. But if it rips, fakes out, you know, hits this stop, because this is definitely like more of a tighter stop. If it hits that and then it comes back up, I'll definitely think about adding on. The reversal, so I like it here because of this reversal zone. To me, big picture wise, if we're gonna stay in this bullish state that we have been, you know, we have this big picture range here that we broke up. And so theoretically, we're in a new big picture range. And to me, this is, if we're gonna bounce, this is where it's gonna happen. You know, there's a clean support here, I think. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I'm seeing signals that I think give me enough reason to take the stab at that if that happens. And if that happens, you know, I make money. And if it doesn't, I lose money. And the idea is that over time, you know, I'll make more money than I lose at these levels, because a lot of the times, frankly, I'm generally right, and I just need to get better about executing them. I lost my train of thought there, but and then I guess the reversal pattern is seeing this big, this is a nice V bottom that is like, okay, that can signal that the down move is done. You know, that it's just whipped back here, and that this is the extreme low if it's going to bottom. And then it made a nice, essentially double test here where it kind of tested this low, essentially made a higher low. You know, downtrends are lower lows and lower highs, and uptrends are higher highs and higher lows. And so you get that, that shift is essentially right here, where it transfers from lower low and lower high to, it makes actually a higher low here and a higher high. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We've made a higher low and we've actually made a higher high. And so the idea is that, to me, helps signal that there's an uptrend in place. and that this is a pretty nice rejection candle of it attempting to go lower and failing and breaking this downtrend line. So that was kind of the reversal pattern. And then the confirmation was just breaking above the previous swing. And of course, like the big picture, because that's all micro stuff, I'm trying to avoid looking at that more. I want to be looking at the big picture because that's where really the good signals are, is that we've come down, made a big move to the downside, and we're tapping a support level that is a likely spot for it to reverse if it's going to. And you know, because of how big the move was, I have such a wide stop because I could totally see us coming up here to this and having a big whip down before we continue up again. And I don't want to get stopped out by that because to me, the signal is the trade is in place and this bottom is happening until this low down here is broken. So it could come all the way down here and then recover because of how much volatility we're having. It's a lot of time it's not just going to do this. It does in this market. That's why I'm taking a stab here. I think normally I would avoid this because of how big the move down is, but because of how reversal we have been, and I'm okay sizing in smaller risk. And then, you know, if it does set up like a 5-minute and do one more fake lower that looks really, really solid as a bait that traps people to the short side, I will add on. And then, you know, from there, hopefully it goes up and I make more money. But until then, you know, it's kind of just waiting it out, seeing if it reverses. Because a lot of the times these things, it can do a little bit of a pop here and then actually just continue lower. Because it is just working off some of this crazy move. And then the big picture comes back into play if the big picture is shifting. But right now, the big picture is generally to the upside off of this support zone. And, you know, just looking back, right? Anytime we kind of have a pullback, we're generally pushing to the upside. And so that's how, you know, I want to be focusing on sticking to that strategy and that process and, you know, not getting married to a specific one needs to work out, you know, of just taking stabs where it makes sense, where the strategy sets up, and then letting the numbers work out themselves out over time. NinjaTrader makes you fund the account for demo. I think the min account, if you're putting in for the actual brokerage account, I think you only need to put $100. I don't know their exact account minimums. But let me know if you guys have any questions on anything I'm doing here. I will try and answer them. You do need to hit that sub button to be able to ask questions. Right now, you know, there's nothing really to do other than just let this thing play out. ES looks very similar in terms of it's kind of recovering this. I really think it's going to make one more pullback before it goes up. And so I'm expecting some kind of spike here that hurts to hold through. And if it does, and it reverses that, I would jump in more. And if it doesn't and it just knocks me out, then I'll just move on. Why not entering on the pullback? I'm assuming you're meaning like enter in here with my stop here. To me, I just wanted to see kind of it break this high. Because this was kind of a spike from news. I could see it just pop up here in reverse. And I don't have my stop here because I think it might do a spike lower. And I think this is really where the low is. If this is going to reverse to the upside, I don't think this low will get broken. This low totally could. And we've seen that over the last few months is this does get broken pretty often. Do I scale out? I sometimes will. If we made a fast run up here, I might take a portion off because that's the all-time highs. That's where I would assume that we would find some kind of resistance, especially if it has a very fast move. It's likely to have a pullback. Even if the big picture trend after that pullback does continue higher. And so, but you don't necessarily know that. It could do a run up and then just do a top and continue lower. Or it could just run up and sell off. And so that's why I think scaling out half or some, if it does a very fast run up like that, is important, because there's no, otherwise if we do this, like I can methodically move my stop up and capture that and let it kind of pull back and continue higher. That's an easier way for me to hold through it hitting the highs. But if it just does a fast run up, then you got to be aware and understand. I had this issue the other day, a couple weeks ago, I think, where it did a fast run up and I was like, okay, I think big picture we go higher. But it did such a deep pullback that I just gave up way too much money, and it just sucked to hold through. And it was stupid in hindsight. And that was a learning lesson, because for me, scaling in and scaling out is actually new. I have been wanting to do it for a long time, but it just, you want to slowly add things to your trading. You don't want to do too much at once, right? Like as a beginner, I had a fixed profit target and a fixed stop loss, and I would move my stop up a little bit, but I wouldn't move my profit target. But now, over time, I shifted to managing my stop in different ways and managing my profit target in different ways. You slowly increase the complexity of what you're doing, because you have the emotional ability to do that while you're in a trade and not do something stupid. Because I think if you allow yourself the flexibility to be moving your stop around or moving your profit target around, you're gonna get greedy or get scared and either move your stop up too quickly and get knocked out on a pullback, or you're just gonna, as this thing shoots up, you're gonna, maybe your profit target was right here and you think, oh, I'm gonna move that because I think it's just gonna keep going. I don't want to miss out. You get greedy, and then it just pulls back, and you're like, I should have just got out. So where am I looking to take profits? The initial one is definitely up here. Essentially, with giving these unhealthy moves, the whole goal, if I go to a 5 minute, I'll show it on the ES because the ES shows it a little better, is, we had this unhealthy move. There was these fair value gaps. I want to see that move given back up. So in the ES, the target would essentially be here, knowing that, okay, that's the easy money. And from here, we could continue higher, or we could actually reverse, or just have some turmoil for a while. And so same thing on the NASDAQ is there's not as good of a fair value gap because we had that kind of pullback. But I think, the open is the target here. That's the easy money, or the highs. That's, to me, is the easy money of having this big unhealthy move essentially reverse, right? So my target's really just going to be, my soft target is going to be up here. But as well, big picture, I want to keep that in mind too, is anytime we have a pullback like this, is generally it pushes the highs. And a lot of times when we make new all-time highs, we actually continue higher. So I want to, depending on what it looks like when we get there, I want to have some flexibility there to say, okay, this was just a massive fake lower. How can I try and hold this to the upside to not give back too much, manage my stop in the trade, not get too greedy, obviously. But if it's going to continue up for the next hour or two, what does that look like, Hopefully it doesn't go for the next hour or two, but if it goes up for the next hour or two, I'll hold, if it makes sense. And I'm not going to move my stop loss up yet. To something like break even, it might feel good to do that, but to me that's too early right now. We're having these methodical pullbacks. We could totally have a flush here and continue higher. I'm not going to hold all the way down to here. If it pulls back and kind of makes a lower high and starts to look like it's going to go lower, I'll definitely move my stop up and reduce the risk. So I kind of have a mental trailing stop right now versus having it in a specific spot. You know, I could move it up here. Like, because definitely if it comes all the way down there, I'm okay getting out. And for me adding, I'm not adding here. What to me, I wanted to add if there was one more fake lower. To me, that's a good signal versus here. Like any of these this little pullback right here, that to me wasn't a good signal. And I'm okay, you know, if it just does that and I only get half size up here, it's fine, you know, like I'm still capturing it, you know, half size because I want to size up soon in a month or two. Half size is now going to be you know, my future half size will be my full size, and this will be $1,500. So, you know, you don't want to try and get too sucked into the numbers because sizing up will always increase that. This is not TradingView. This is NinjaTrader. If you want to check it out and start practicing trading futures on it, there is a link in the description of the live stream. Also, I have a bot that puts it up in the chat every now and then. How large is my account? I think it's about $30,000 for trading this size. I don't like auto trailing stops. They just, because what I want to do for managing is I want to read the signals that the market's telling me. That's why I put my stop below extreme lows, because to me, the price movement is protecting my stop. And if you just have a random stop, like if I entered in here and had a random stop, like, you know, if you consistently have, like, let's say in the NASDAQ, like a 20-point stop, there's nothing protecting that. You could have easily got knocked out on this little wick pullback before it continues higher. So that's why it's like I move my stop up with the swings and with the price movement that's happening, because that's really where the signal is. How much do I risk per trade? Right now I'm risking $800 in this trade, but it's half my normal size. My full size right now is target's about $1,500. And honestly, there's kind of someone just said news, and here we have a little spike. There is kind of an uptrend right here. And a little spike like this, I like that if it recovers, because to me, that keeps this healthy. And to me, a healthy trend, I am happy to stay in. S&P 500 had much more of a pullback there. Just looking at it on a 5-minute chart, I wonder if that's kind of the 50%. Not really. Again, like if this starts to flag out here, maybe breaks this uptrend, I don't know if I'll move my stop to break even. I definitely think I could definitely move my stop up to here right now, below this swing. Because I think if we pull back all the way here, I'll leave it down here for now. I would rather let a spike. I just actually want to look at where makes sense for a pullback. I'm going to remove this support. I just want to kind of get a little more prepared for what a pullback might look like, a healthy one. To me, a healthy one would retest this high or just this kind of range. We could pull back all the way down to test this. That to me is pretty deep. But I think a healthy move would be coming down to here somewhere. And so I don't want to go to break even yet. Or even honestly here, because my thought was, well, what if we just spike and then just rip it back up again? I'm okay leaving a little risk there. But as this gets up here, you know, again, thinking about And it looks like maybe we just bounced off of this. And again, I'm just using super micro levels. It looks like we're actually testing this level, this pre-market, because that just helps me kind of read what's happening in the market. I'm not necessarily like using those for massive trade signals, but just helps me kind of read, okay, we're ping-ponging between this and this. Those are minor levels. You know, seeing a little bit of movement here gets a little nervous because you think, oh, it's going to sell off now. But again, you know, just trying to look at, okay, the big picture is we're kind of just coming up to this zone and we're sitting here for a minute and going higher. You know, the 5 minute looks pretty clean still. On the ES, it looks like maybe it's come up and tested this area. ES definitely looks weaker. But I think on a 5 minute, like a pullback down to here to continue higher, that looks super, super healthy. And, you know, you could say we made a little fair value gap here on a 5 minute for the NASDAQ. And so again, pulling that back and recovering that would be healthy to me. So I'm just going to let this sit on a 5 minute for a minute here. How often am I live? I am live every day I trade, which is pretty much 4 to 5 days a week. My support zones are drawn from generally the big picture ones, a 15 minute or a 5 minute chart. These smaller ones, though, these are just here for me looking at the trade, reading what's kind of going on since I'm in a trade now. But big picture, you know, this trade that I took was off of this major support level. That's where, you know, I see that the market is likely to reverse and I want to take stabs in the market. And so there's not really much to do here other than just letting this kind of work its way through. I think it's trying to get through the pre-market lows right here, this swing. So that's why it's struggling a little bit. And if it does that and then breaks through, like I think it's looking pretty good. The ES here is struggling a little bit more, but it has been a little weaker. So we'll just kind of see what happens here. You know, I think a little spike lower here is healthy to the upside. If it starts to develop more to the downside, I'll close out, most likely at break even. And, you know, thinking hindsight, like I don't really think there was could I have been more aggressive with my entry here? And, you know, maybe I could have got in here. Like right here. On the break of this candlestick, but that was kind of with news. So that's the hard part about this entry was there was kind of this news spike. And I think entering on that would not have been a good decision. And that's the hard part sometimes about having news release right when you're looking to jump in a trade. You got to just, that it happens sometimes, right? And I think it's better to be more cautious in those spots. Why are fair value gaps important? Are they not something? They are kind of normal price action, but they help you, and I think help me kind of see when the market's overextended to one direction. And so I use fair value gaps as a magnet of like, okay, it's sold off, it's made this fair value gap, it's likely to fill that gap and come back up here. And so to me, that's how I look for my reversals. Some people use them as like a pullback indicator of like, okay, it's going to come back, it's going to fill this fair value gap and continue lower. I like to use it in the flip side of, okay, it's overextended, it's going to rip back, and I can get in kind of at the lows. Couldn't really do it today, but you can theoretically sometimes get in with a very accurate entry, and then, you know, you can get 3 to 2-3 times your risk to the reversal side. And so that's, to me, is one of the biggest catalysts for looking for reversals. And if you just look at a bigger picture chart, even this morning we had one, boom, it reversed it. So it's just such a super common, simple thing that happens a lot. And I think in trading, I'm just adjusting this uptrend because it looks like it's still holding it. Trading, you think trading has to be complicated because it can be, but it just doesn't. The complicated part is your ability to control your emotions and execute things consistently and properly. I don't use leverage technically because futures just inherently are leveraged. If you're new to futures, again, go to my YouTube channel. There's a ton of tutorials that talk about my strategy, how I find my levels, and then also futures. Just kind of waiting for this pullback to play out here. Again, my stop is not going to be all the way down here if it comes back, but I don't want to go break even yet because I think it totally could have a little spike here. To me, I think this is a support level that I think is pretty healthy for it to have a pullback to continue higher. Like of course, I would love if it just shot up, but big picture, I think this trend is a little slower today, and that's less likely. I think having a whip down to bait people to the short side or get people out of the longs is a good signal for it to continue higher. And there's not really much of a point of me closing out here. I'm not risking much with the idea that, well, if it continues up, I think there's a lot more profit potential. Thinking about how my risk reward is adjusting as the trade goes on. Why do I trade the NASDAQ, not the ES? This is actually something I've been struggling with a lot recently, of which one to trade, trying to use confirmation and read both. And actually just last night, I decided I'm only going to trade the NASDAQ. I'm not going to look at the ES on a 1-minute chart. I did a little bit today, I actually will say that, but just because of how fast this move was. And I don't want to try and read into the correlation too much on a 1-minute by 1-minute basis. I want to just say, okay, what's the ES doing on a 5-minute, right? It looks like it's coming to the support level. It's got this fair value gap. I think it's likely to, it's kind of the same thing as the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ came down to support. It looks like it could bounce, right? So that's enough correlation for me there. And then I just want to focus on trading the NASDAQ right now, I think, because the moves are way better. It is a little trickier in terms of stops sometimes and the volatility. But I think, again, trying to be more simplified is, I think it's just been a distraction. And so you can do either. But I think right now, for me, I want to try and focus on the NASDAQ. The moves have just been a lot better consistently. Not all the time. But just because that's generally what I've been seeing, though. Nice little breakout there. Again, on a 5-minute, like we're chilling. On the ES on a 5-minute, if this continues higher, this is just a nice higher low on a 5-minute. That's why I kind of want to be looking at just the big picture, but and not reading too much into this middle action, because we're in the middle of the range. It's gonna do some of this before hopefully the big picture kind of starts to go for the highs here, which I think is the magnet. But as it gets closer, that's big picture of, okay, well, this is a spot where I think it could reverse or slow down. I then do want to start to manage a little tighter. Because that's, to me, is kind of where I see this potential slowing down, and the upside on the trade starts to get reduced over time. Of course, we could just shoot all the way up here, But to me, the easy money is, you know, from here to up here, right? It is looking for this move that went down to reverse. And so once that's done, I want to be cautious about trying to get greedy and going for too much. And, you know, we're kind of just, we're holding this uptrend so far. And again, like we've got all these little minor resistance zones that we're running into. And so, you know, I think that's kind of slowing us down a little bit. Someone said, you know, this could set up a head and shoulders. You know, we'll see if that happens. You know, this could be a little, but that's why I don't want to read too much into that stuff, because then you start to just see stuff and you get too nervous. That's why going to just a 5-minute chart can really help calm those nerves, because you're not looking at every move. You know, on a 5-minute, this looks totally fine. Time to move to break even. Yeah, pretty close. I mean, I think, yeah, break even at this point makes sense. Again, it's just, if it spikes here, I think a spike down to here makes sense. I think a spike all the way down to here would be kind of too much. I think there's nothing wrong with moving to break even. You know, it could come down to here and bounce. But again, that's just, it's given too much wiggle room at that point. You know, I need to just take a risk off the table. And that's the hard part about sometimes having such a wide stop like this, is it feels, risk reward wise, I feel like I'm not really getting that much out of the trade. Like this is a small win right now. But, you know, again, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on, you know, the sizing. This money will go up as I size up. It's more about, can I, you know, can you essentially profitably capture moves, and the risk reward play out well over time, you know? You don't have to be, a big thing I'm trying to help with myself too is you don't have to be perfect when you're with your trades to make money trading. You know, like this entry was not perfect maybe, but I still got in, and you know, I'm up money at the moment. Why not sell 2 contracts and leave a runner? I definitely will probably do that when we get more to the highs. But right now, like we're holding this uptrend line. Like this is, to me, this is my trailing stop is kind of, at least mentally, is with this trend line. And so until we break that, like we're just kind of cruising up. Like there's no point in me taking anything off the table. ES is still kind of struggling here in the middle of the range. You know, it's one of those things sometimes with these trades is they kind of take some time to get going. It feels painful waiting for this to really get going. But it could, like if the ES really breaks this and starts to accelerate, the NASDAQ could start to accelerate too. We've definitely had that happen where if I kind of zoom back, I don't know if I'll be able to do this very well. Let me see. I'm trying to think of just a trade here. An example from the last couple weeks where it kind of showed this. I don't know if I can find it right now, actually. But, you know, sometimes when it hits, it can really start to accelerate once it gets here, because no one's going to want to short up here. I mean, maybe they will, but like I wouldn't short in this market at the highs. And so we could start to accelerate and kind of blow the top off of this. And so that's why I don't necessarily want to trail up yet, because there's really no signal to. But if we start to kind of go sideways, break this uptrend, make, you know, a lower high, I'll think about taking some off or just getting out, you know. But again, I'm not trying to read too much into things. You know, we've hit this high, pulling back to this area is, you know, I like to use this uptrend, but I don't get married to it as, oh, as soon as this breaks, it's over. Because sometimes these uptrends can kind of do this. Again, just got to wait it out. The stop loss is manually moved up. Do I think my resistance lines are different widths? Because I use them like zones. I try not to think about it has to hit a specific exact level. I think of it as a zone, you know? If it comes down to somewhere here, I think that's where it could bounce, you know? Same thing with here. It's like, okay, there's this zone. It could come up to the low here, or it could break the high. You know, think about supply and demand. You know, it's not, the market doesn't bounce at the exact same level every time. Same thing with this major support down here is the market blew through that, but then it failed to continue. Essentially, I call that a fail breakout. And so it reversed here. A little scary of a pullback here. You know, it would suck to get out at break even, but, you know, that's just a part of the things, right? I think it's more likely that we make a stab lower and recover. And I have a nice wide stop so I don't get theoretically knocked out on one of those. This, I think, is turning into a pretty good support. And I think if we break that and come down and knock me out at break even, you know, that might be what the market just has today. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to always reverse and trend extremely strong. And if it makes a new high here, I'll move my stop up below this and then start to see what this looks like as we kind of get to the highs and maybe get a little tighter and take some profit off. But again, like the ES here, the SP 500 here, I think this looks great. This looks great as a, it's just slowly looking to break this. And I think if the ES breaks this, it goes up to here. And that's a nice punch. And that punch up is going to help fuel the NASDAQ probably up to here. Just got to let things play out. It's not really moving fast enough to, I think, warrant moving my stop so quickly. You know, it's a lot more methodical. If the market was moving like this to the upside, I would be trailing my stop up very quickly. But right now, we're not really moving like that. And so, you know, I think it's too aggressive to move your stop up too quickly. It allows you to get stopped out by just jitters in the market. You know, on a 5 minute, this is a nice pullback. And if I'm looking at holding, you know, trading off of a 5 minute, I mean, I think this is a good spot to have my stop. And I think if we start to push lower against this, I'll move my stop up here. Again, I like to wait for a new high to be made because to me that confirms that this low is put in. What am I trading? I'm trading the NASDAQ futures. In reality, you know, this is just big picture. This is just bullish consolidation. I think someone just said bull flag. Yeah, I mean, like we've gone up. I think if this was going to reverse, it would have done it here. It would have done it here. But this having a pullback and a strong, really strong bullish candlestick here, that is a very nice bottom signal to me that it's likely to continue higher. You know, that's the exact same kind of fake lower reversal that I like to see at the actual extreme lows that I make. And so to me, that's just a continuation signal. I'm not gonna add on because of that, because I think the potential to continue higher and a good mount isn't there. But to me, that's a good signal to continue higher. And so I'll likely move my stop up to here. I'm just kind of watching it play out here. And, you know, looking at the ES on a 5-minute, ES is still just sitting here. I'm not going to look at a 1-minute chart because it doesn't matter. The main thing is that it just looks like it's kind of consolidating here and waiting to kind of break through this. And I think if it does, we'll get a nice run to the highs, and I'll probably start to scale out there. Get out if it starts going against me and get back in. I don't like to. I think if you try and, you know, say, oh, I'll take some out, and then if it goes against me, I at least made my money, and then get back in, because to me you're just I wouldn't jump in here with a trade if I was not in. Like, to me, we're in the middle of the range. There's the easy money is most likely over. Like, we're kind of showing signs of slowing down. You know, I don't want to chase this, but because I'm in a trade, you know, I'll trail up and see what happens, right? I'll move my stop up here now, kind of up here somewhere. It looks like it's going to break higher. I'm just going to remove this trend line. Actually, I'm going to see if I can adjust it here. It's still hitting these and hitting this. So to me, it's like trend lines are super subjective. That's why I don't like to get married to them. You know, with the idea that, oh, this trend line here is broken, so because that trend line's broken, I should sell because now we're going to go lower. Like, you can see that we held that and reversed. And now that I have more information, I can adjust it to here. I think this is probably the last way I would be able to adjust it. But to me, it's like, oh, it's still holding this trend line. And now I'll move my stop up below this swing because I think that's a great spot. And again, just let this kind of do its thing. And we might still be running into this little resistance zone right here. Also, that kind of takes into account the market open of right here. ES, not really much going on there. NASDAQ on a 5-minute. You know, I think that's a really nice pullback to the upside. If it, you know, tops here and just rips, then I'll get out. To me, it makes it way easier to be methodical about it like this, to try and stay with the trends. Because otherwise, I think it's so easy to get knocked out by a lot of the jitters in the middle of the range. Why did I reduce my contract size? Well, my risk here is half size. Based on where I entered in, it only allowed 3 contracts to have my stop all the way down here at this low, just because of how volatile the market is this morning. And I didn't full size, because to full size, I wanted to see one more like fake lower. Then I would have sized in again and gone full size. But with just how big this move was down, you know, to me, it just seemed, okay, it's huge moves like this have a hard time reversing all the way to the highs. But because of how this market has been, I did take a stab at that because it has been, you know, reversing way more often than I am used to. So that's why I kind of took that. But smaller size, super wide stop, and you know, you can see here, as we're kind of getting up to this area, we're struggling. Like, it's not just blowing the top off of this and being a super easy trade. You know, the ES here is kind of struggling too. So you know, this kind of on a 5 minute doesn't look that good in terms of it's kind of a bait candle. But again, it's like I'm gonna leave my stop here, and if it knocks me out, I'll capture a little bit of this move. And I'm not closing out here as it's slowing down, because to me, I think we're still holding this trend line. And, you know, I think it's like, okay, I'm risking about like this much. And I think at least we go up to here if we kind of move higher. I think it's more likely we push higher. And so to me, that's, you know, I'm risking essentially 1 to make 1. And because this is a good uptrend, well, we could continue higher and I could be making more. And so, you know, that's how I'm thinking about risk reward as the trade develops. I don't really have you know, I don't have it in my plan of scaling out here in the middle of the range. To me, it's like I want to see it kind of get up to here, which is where I see the bigger levels. Like all these levels are just micro levels. And so I don't want to read too much into these micro pullbacks. I want to be sitting with the bigger picture, because otherwise it's just noise. What are my thoughts on VWAP? I just don't use them. I don't use like a lot of other indicators and market depth and all that stuff. To me, I feel like I can get enough info from what I'm seeing. It works. For me, you know, it's simple enough. Maybe it would improve my trading, and maybe adding something like that is something I'll do down the road. But at the moment, it's not what I'm looking to do. Definitely struggling to get going here. Like, to me, this does look like it's gonna pull back a little bit. And I'm not gonna try and hold through a larger pullback. Even if this comes down here and bounces and continues higher, that's just not worth holding through. Big picture on the 15 minute, just looking at this. You know, like we did reverse, most of it's been reversed. And so I don't want to I want to try and be thinking about the move and the price versus where my trade is. And we're slowing down here, but I also don't think it's, you know, maybe I could have my stop below this low instead of this low to kind of have it hold this support. But also the ES is kind of hitting this too. So part of me wants to move this down a little bit, just below this support level, just to kind of stay with that, because I think, you know, maybe we spike here a little bit and we're just in this range. And I'd rather risk a tiny bit more to have it below this low and below this support range. If it, you know, keeps me in the trade. You know, I'm risking a little bit more, I think, there to stay with the potential signal. And if it breaks that, though, like I'll get out. You know, it might be a little frustrating that, like, okay, from this move that I capture, I don't make that much money, because, you know, last week I took a couple of moves that were larger losses, but you know, I don't want to focus too much on that right now. I think the big thing is capturing these swings and realizing that, like, this one was super large and that it just didn't play out very well. You know, it started to look good. I don't think there was really a reason to trail up here. Like, this bait lower looked really good. You know, maybe I could have said, okay, I should close out some here. But to me, that's just reading into the micro moves a little too much. I don't want to get too married to doing that. You know, it's making kind of another push lower here on a 5 minute. I could totally see it coming down here and pushing higher. But for me, I'm out of the trade at this point. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was much more to do there. You know, it could spike here and go up, but I gave it plenty of chances. I think that's the hard part, is sometimes you get married of like, oh, what if it bounces here, or what if it bounces here and goes up? It's easy to kind of get in that mentality of giving it more and more room. So the better trades usually work out in my favor, you know, or in your favor fast. You know, I think if it should have bounced here, should have bounced here. And if it bounces here after just knocking me out at this zone, that's trading, you know. It happens sometimes. It would suck. But you don't want to get too, you know, the way I was moving my stop, I think, was methodical. I gave it enough room. And if it just rips after that, that is rough. But, you know, again, you don't know. You want to focus on what you can control versus what you can't. You know, I can't control that this is going to spike like this and then potentially continue higher. And it might not. You know, it could just, to me, this means that the market's just not great right now. It might just slow down, continue higher, you know. And so that's why a lot of times I was very slow with moving my stop up, just to give the market kind of a little bit of extra room. But I think at this point, when it broke this, to me, it's getting close to where it could reverse for the day. And so I think at that point, moving it made sense, you know. So how much did I make? Let's see. It was probably just like $200 or $300. $190. Which, you know, yeah, like for my size is just not great, but it's like I'm more focusing right now on making these kind of aggressive adjustments and pushing that comfort zone in. To me, it's not as much as the money is still there and it's part of the thought. But to me right now, I'm focusing more on jumping in on where I consider these aggressive reversals where it doesn't set up perfectly for me. And in the past, I just would not take it all. And right now, I want to start taking these. And so to me, I'm more focused on, can I push through the nervousness and the wanting to wait for a more confirmation on the signal, you know? And then so that's kind of, you know, I think is more important. You know, you guys say green is green to some extent, you know, like if you're making not great amount, like to me, that's not good risk reward. Like risking taking this move, if I know I'm going to get that much, it's not worth it. But obviously that's hindsight, right? But I would ideally, on average, for a win from that, I would like to get 1 to 2x. And some of them have been totally working out like that. So just, you know, part of the process. I'm very happy though with mentally. Earlier in the week, I was more frustrated and focusing on the P&L. And I think if I was doing that, I would not have jumped in this spot today. So again, it's not always about your P&L. It's about focusing on your process, what mental hurdles you're trying to get over, what changes you're trying to do. And as always, journal and you know, focus on that going forwards. So I'll try and answer a couple questions, but at this moment, you know, like this just seems like it's just going to chop. The profit loss, this indicator is a custom drawing tool that I've created for NinjaTrader. There's a link for it in the description of the live stream. Don't even watch my stream to trade, just watch to hear the psychology. I mean, yeah, if that's what a lot of people find help from, I think that's the more important thing. Like, don't watch me to copy trade, because I am doing my own thing. I'm making adjustments. Like right now, I'm not making that much money consistently over time because I'm making what I consider to be a massive adjustment to my trading, which is causing some ups and downs to my psychology and my P&L, and also streaming adds a ton of stress and negative impact, frankly, on my trading. But everyone is slightly different, and so if you can take some stuff from my stream, how I talk through things, and it can make you more profitable, to me that's a win. That's why I'm here. I'm not here to show you guys that I'm making millions of dollars and I have a private jet, something ridiculous like that. I'm here to give you as much help as possible and insight into things, especially on the psychology side. A lot of people don't really talk about that. And to me, that's 90% of trading. I did take profits on the trade. I made $200. Pretty small, but again, that's what the market did. The market went up most of the way. It looked like it was going to continue higher, but it just kind of slowed down. It might do this now. I'm not going to take a trade there because my big level was here. To me, we're in the middle of the range, big picture. It's kind of in the middle of the range. It really looked like it was about to, if it was going to break, it was going to make a run on the ES and the NASDAQ, and that's what I was looking for. But it doesn't always play out like that, right? All you can do is control the entries and go from there. Thanks for all the really nice, kind words. I always really appreciate them. I'm happy that I can help you guys as much as I possible. How do I deal with losing months of profits? Right now, like last week I had a losing week. And I'm kind of more break even right now because of some of the changes I'm trying to do in streaming, and getting used to that pressure that it adds to my trading. Depending on how down you are on your emotions, you got to reset, take days off, take weeks off. If you're really in a hole, go back to demo trading if that helps you build your confidence, and then slowly just, or downsize your risk, and slowly come back into things. I think for me, I'm going half size on pretty much all my trades right now because to me that helps reduce the intensity of trading, and because I'm changing things and less confident in things, because I'm trying to scale in and size in and scale out. That helps you. Intensity dial of sizing really helps you deal with some of that stuff. How do I reward myself after winning a good trade? I don't know if you want to think about it like that. You want to maybe reward yourself after entering in a good trade, no matter the outcome. Because to me, that's doubling down on the emotion of the outcome, and that's not a good thing to do with trading. I think what you want to do is, I try and always think about it as you want to be as level-headed as possible, no matter what. You don't want to have a big win and have a big high, because that's not good for your trading either. Or you don't want to just get too down on yourself and have a loss after a big losing streak. Now, obviously those happen, but you want to try and, if you're using or if you're having a swing in either of those directions, you want to just try and almost calm yourself. Acknowledge hey, I'm doing a really good job. I just had the biggest win of my career so far. But you want to try and not let it run away with you. Feel those emotions and then kind of move on. Reset, go for a walk, do what you need to do, because that's really gonna, you got to come in the next day, reset, and knowing that anything could happen. Do I day trade on the trend or the day? Pretty much the last couple of days, I kind of look at the 15-minute chart. If you come in maybe a little earlier, you'll kind of see my analysis for the day. My stop losses are always market. You should, I think, always have a market order as your stop loss. Having a limit order opens you up to the risk of, if your stop loss is here and the market just all of a sudden blows through your order, you now have increased your stop or your risk on the trade exponentially. And so having a market stop order, I think, is one of the most important things you can do, because it keeps you safe from exponential downside risk. My nervousness doesn't show very well, or doesn't really show. I wasn't super nervous today, a little bit when entering, but definitely sometimes it will. You know, you have ups and downs, right? Some days you can, you're more mentally strong. You know, your body battery is really high. You're well rested. Your decision fatigue isn't that bad, and it's easy to deal with those emotions. What you want to be careful of is when you're trading and you're tired, you're mentally fatigued. You know, it's Thursday or Friday and you've been trading and it's been a really hard week, and you just show up to trading not refreshed. That's when it's harder for you to control your emotions and not let them negatively impact your trading. That's what you want to be aware of every single day, is you want to be checking in with yourself. How am I this morning? Am I mentally clear? You know, did I sleep well last night? Because trading is decision making. That's all it is. And it's 100% important on and how you can make good decisions. And if you are not in a mental state to make a good decision, you're going to lose money and make mistakes. And so that's why I am, every single day after trading, I am focused on, you know, I go on a walk with my dog. Depending on how the day is, you know, I will do what helps me reset and kind of de-stress from trading. And then in the evening, I will journal before I go to bed, because it helps me kind of relax. And honestly, my brain will keep me up if I don't. And so everyone's kind of different, but you know, you got to do stuff that allows you to mentally reset and ground yourself on a process, no matter what kind of the outcome has been in your trading recently. Because, you know, when you're growing with trading, tangibly, you're going to be losing money a lot, even though you're getting better over time. It's going to take you a long time to actually start to see consistent profits a lot of the time, because you have to get to a certain point with your trading. But even though you're getting better and better every day, you're not necessarily seeing that, and that's hard to deal with. Can I repeat the last part about a market stop? I would always have your stop loss as a market order. So technically it would be a stop market order. Essentially how it works is if the price hits that, it just inputs a sell market order. And so it gets you out at the most recent price. This checklist is a indicator that I've created for NinjaTrader. I haven't released it yet to my indicator bundle, but hopefully this week. I'm just waiting for a couple of changes back from my coder. Trading journal or life journal on my journaling? A little bit of both, you know, because everything comes into play, right? You could have something personal going on that is mentally messing you up, and that affects your trading, right? And so you got to deal with that as well. And make it so you can kind of reset, so you can sleep, come in rested the next day, and trade. So I think I'm gonna call it there. If you're new, I stream pretty much every day. I trade 4 to 5 days a week. If you have questions on futures and my strategy, go check out my YouTube channel. And also, if you are interested in my indicators, I do have a sale on those right now. Same thing actually with my, I have a trading course that goes into all of this in a lot more detail. It's not, you don't have to buy it. I'm not hiding anything secret behind there. It's just everything in one specific area. So it just helps that learning curve get accelerated. So that is also in the link in the description. Other than that, I will see you guys tomorrow. I'm gonna go for a walk with my dog, kind of reset, think about trading, and move on with my day. I will be live tomorrow. So as always, I appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate your kind words and your support. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow.